The early morning sunlight streamed through the large windows of Washington Dulles International Airport as travelers rushed to their gates. Among them was Michael Taylor, a tall man with kind eyes and a confident walk. At 42, Michael had spent the last 15 years working for the FBI's counterterrorism division. Today, he wore a simple navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants, no need to draw attention to himself on this flight to Los Angeles. Michael checked his watch and adjusted the strap of his carry-on bag. He'd just wrapped up one of the biggest cases of his career, spending weeks tracking down a dangerous threat to national security. The successful operation had left him exhausted but satisfied. Now he was heading to an important bureau conference where he'd be sharing his expertise with other agents from across the country. Flight 2387 to Los Angeles is now boarding passengers with small children and those needing special assistance, announced the gate agent over the loudspeaker. Michael pulled out his boarding pass and waited patiently. He'd learned long ago that patience was one of his greatest tools, both in his personal life and his professional one. When his group was finally called, he joined the line, exchanged pleasantries with the gate agent, and made his way down the jet bridge. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard," greeted the flight attendant as Michael stepped onto the plane. He nodded politely and made his way down the narrow aisle to seat 23A, a window seat in the economy section. As he settled in, Michael looked out at the airport workers loading luggage into the plane's belly. He pulled out his phone to send a quick text to his wife, letting her know he'd boarded safely. They'd been married for 12 years, with 2 wonderful kids who understood that sometimes Dad's important work kept him away from home. He smiled at their family photo on his phone background before switching it to airplane mode. The plane gradually filled with passengers, business people in wrinkled suits, families with restless children, college students with headphones already in place. Michael always found people watching fascinating. Years of training had taught him to notice details others might miss. A nervous tick, a suspicious glance, unusual behavior patterns. But today, he was off duty. Today, he just wanted to be an ordinary passenger enjoying a peaceful flight before diving back into work at the conference. He closed his eyes briefly, looking forward to catching up on sleep during the 5-hour flight. The gentle hum of conversations and the familiar airplane sounds almost lulled him into a doze when a sharp voice jolted him back to alertness. "Excuse me. I believe that's my row." Michael opened his eyes to see a woman standing in the aisle, her expression already twisted with annoyance. Patricia Wilson, though he didn't know her name yet, was around 50, with highlighted blonde hair styled in an expensive-looking bob. She wore designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, bright red lipstick, and clutched a Louis Vuitton handbag close to her chest. Everything about her screamed money and privilege. "Of course," Michael said with a friendly smile, shifting his legs to make room for her to pass. Patricia glanced at her boarding pass, then at the seat numbers, her frown deepening when she realized the middle seat was hers. She looked at Michael again, this time more carefully, her eyes moving from his face to his casual clothes, making a quick and entirely inaccurate assessment. "Great," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear. "Just great." Michael pretended not to notice her tone as she awkwardly squeezed past an elderly gentleman who had already taken the aisle seat. As Patricia settled into the middle seat, she sighed dramatically and pulled her handbag closer to her chest rather than placing it under the seat in front of her. The elderly man offered a friendly smile to both of them. "Heading to LA for business or pleasure?" he asked conversationally. "Business," Michael replied warmly. "I don't mean to be rude," Patricia interrupted, "but I've had a long morning and would prefer some quiet." The elderly man nodded understandingly, but Michael caught the slight shift in Patricia's posture, leaning slightly away from him and toward the aisle seat. It was subtle, but it was a movement he'd seen countless times before. The flight hadn't even taken off, but Michael could already sense that this journey might be more challenging than he'd anticipated. Little did he know just how true that would prove to be. The plane's engines hummed steadily as the flight attendants prepared for takeoff. Michael shifted in his window seat, trying to find a comfortable position for the long journey ahead. The elderly man in the aisle seat had already dozed off, his chin tucked against his chest. Between them, Patricia kept checking her watch and sighing loudly. Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure your seatbelts are fastened, tray tables are in their upright position, and all personal items are stowed under the seat in front of you or in the overhead compartments, announced the flight attendant. Patricia reluctantly placed her designer handbag under the seat, but kept glancing at it nervously. Michael noticed her unease, but focused on the safety demonstration instead. Soon, the plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the air, climbing steadily above the clouds. 30 minutes into the flight, Michael felt the pressing need to use the restroom. He'd had 2 cups of coffee that morning while finishing his case reports. "Excuse me," he said politely to Patricia. "I need to get past to use the restroom." Patricia's head snapped toward him, her eyes widening. "You want me to move? Now?" "Just for a moment," Michael explained with a patient smile. "I'll be quick." Patricia didn't budge. Instead, she clutched her purse from under the seat and held it tightly to her chest. "I don't think so," she said, her voice rising. "I know what you're trying to do." Michael blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry." "You want me to get up so you can take my things," she declared loudly. Several passengers nearby turned to look. "I've read about these scams. You distract me by asking to get by, and then your accomplice swoops in and grabs my bag." The accusation was so unexpected that Michael was momentarily speechless. "Ma'am, I just need to use the restroom. I don't have an accomplice." "Sure you don't," Patricia scoffed. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers in the air. "Flight attendant, I need assistance immediately." A flight attendant with a name tag reading Linda approached their row. "Is everything okay here?" "No, it's not okay," Patricia said before Michael could speak. "This man is trying to get me to move so he can steal my belongings. I don't feel safe sitting next to him." Linda looked at Michael with questioning eyes. He maintained his composure, though he could feel a familiar knot forming in his stomach, one he'd experienced many times before in similar situations. "Ma'am, I'm just a passenger trying to use the restroom," Michael explained calmly. "I've made no attempt to take your belongings." The elderly man beside them had awakened during the commotion. "I've been sitting here the whole time," he offered. "This gentleman hasn't done anything wrong." Patricia ignored him. "Look at how he's dressed," she continued, gesturing toward Michael's casual clothes. "And then he conveniently wants me to get up right after takeoff. I wasn't born yesterday." She lowered her voice slightly, though still loud enough for nearby rows to hear. "People like him shouldn't even be in this section of the plane." The implication of her words hung heavy in the air. A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Someone a few rows back had pulled out their phone and appeared to be recording the interaction. "Ma'am," Linda said firmly, "there's no evidence that this passenger has any ill intentions. Please allow him to pass so he can use the restroom." "I will not," Patricia insisted, her voice growing shriller. "I demand to be moved to another seat. I don't feel safe here." Michael took a deep breath. In his 15 years at the FBI, he'd faced down armed suspects and terrorist threats, yet somehow this confrontation on a commercial flight felt equally challenging. He needed to defuse the situation without creating a bigger scene. "It's okay," he told Linda. "I can wait." "No, sir, it's not okay," Linda replied, clearly distressed by Patricia's behavior. "Everyone on this flight deserves to be treated with respect." Another flight attendant appeared in the aisle. "Is there a problem here?" Patricia immediately launched into her accusations again, this time adding that Michael had been watching her since she sat down. As she spoke, more passengers pulled out their phones, sensing that something newsworthy was unfolding. Michael maintained his professional demeanor, though inside he was both frustrated and hurt. He'd experienced prejudice before, but rarely so publicly and blatantly. He caught the sympathetic glances of several passengers around him, which somehow made the situation even more uncomfortable. The second flight attendant, a man with a tag reading David, leaned closer to speak quietly to Michael. "Sir, I apologize for this. If you'd like, we can find you another seat." Before Michael could respond, Patricia interjected, "Why are you offering him another seat? I'm the one who doesn't feel safe." The situation was spiraling, and Michael knew it was about to get much worse. The tension in the airplane cabin seemed to thicken with each passing second. By now, almost everyone in the surrounding rows had turned to watch the unfolding drama. Michael could feel dozens of eyes on him, some curious, others sympathetic, a few judgmental. He'd faced dangerous situations before, but there was something uniquely painful about being publicly humiliated for simply existing. "I want to speak to the captain," Patricia demanded, her voice cutting through the hushed murmurs of other passengers. "This is completely unacceptable." Flight attendant David tried once more to calm her. "Ma'am, there's really no need to involve the captain. If you're uncomfortable, we can find you another seat." "Why should I be the one to move?" Patricia snapped. "I paid good money for this ticket. He's the problem here." She gestured dismissively toward Michael without even looking at him. Michael finally spoke up, his voice steady and measured. "I understand you're uncomfortable, ma'am, but I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just trying to get to Los Angeles like everyone else on this plane." Patricia turned to face him fully for the first time. "Oh, really? And what business do you have in Los Angeles?" "I find it hard to believe someone like you could afford a ticket to LA, much less have any legitimate reason to be there." A collective gasp rippled through the nearby passengers. The elderly man in the aisle seat shook his head in disbelief. "That's completely inappropriate," Linda the flight attendant interjected. "Sir, I apologize for—" "No, I want to know," Patricia interrupted. "What's in your bag? Why are you so eager to get me to stand up? And how did you even get a seat in this section of the plane?" Michael took a deep breath. 15 years of FBI training had taught him how to remain calm under pressure, but this was testing his limits. "Ma'am, I'm a professional traveling for work, just like many people on this flight." "A professional what? Thief?" Patricia scoffed. "Let me see some ID then. Prove you're supposed to be on this flight." David stepped closer. "Ma'am, we do not ask passengers to prove their identity to other passengers. That's a violation of privacy." "Then move him to the back of the plane where he belongs," Patricia insisted loudly. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. There was no mistaking her meaning now. Several passengers audibly objected, and the number of phones recording the incident seemed to multiply. A woman 3 rows ahead turned around completely in her seat. "That's disgusting," she called out. "You should be ashamed of yourself." Patricia appeared startled that someone would confront her directly. "Mind your own business," she shot back. "You don't know what it's like to feel threatened." "The only threat on this plane is your racism," someone else called out. The situation was spiraling out of control. Michael caught David's eye and gave a slight shake of his head, silently pleading not to make things worse. The last thing he wanted was for this to escalate further. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and lower your voices," Linda announced firmly. "This is a commercial flight, not a town hall meeting." The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom. "This is your captain speaking. I've been informed of a disturbance in the cabin. I want to remind everyone that disruptive behavior that interferes with flight crew duties is a federal offense. If the situation isn't resolved immediately, we may need to divert to the nearest airport." This announcement prompted another wave of murmurs. Patricia appeared momentarily cowed, but quickly recovered. "He's threatening me now," she hissed. "I demand to see his ticket and ID. He doesn't belong here." Michael had endured enough. With dignity, he reached for his wallet and pulled out his boarding pass. "Here's my boarding pass, ma'am. Seat 23A, the exact seat I'm sitting in." Patricia barely glanced at it. That could be fake. Anyone can print a boarding pass. The elderly man beside them had finally reached his breaking point. "Young lady, that's quite enough. This gentleman has shown remarkable patience with your behavior, which I must say is absolutely appalling. You stay out of this, old man," Patricia snapped. David placed a firm hand on the back of the seat. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice and stop harassing other passengers immediately." "Harassing? I'm the victim here." Patricia's voice had risen to an almost hysterical pitch. Several passengers had unbuckled their seatbelts, seemingly ready to intervene if necessary. Michael felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. This should have been a routine flight. Now it had become a spectacle, with him unwillingly cast as the central character. He stared out the window, wishing he could somehow dissolve into the clouds outside. Years of dealing with situations like this hadn't made them any easier to bear. "Sir," Linda said gently to Michael, "would you like to move to another seat? We have one available in first class." Before he could answer, a voice called out from a few rows back. A man had stood up, his face partially obscured by the overhead bins, but his voice carried clearly through the cabin. "Excuse me, but I think there's something everyone here should know." All eyes turned toward the standing passenger, and Michael felt his heart sink. What new twist would this stranger add to an already unbearable situation? All eyes turned toward the man standing several rows behind them. He was around 50, with salt and pepper hair and the confident posture of someone used to taking charge. The cabin fell silent as he made his way into the aisle. "I normally wouldn't get involved," the man said, "but I can't sit by and watch this continue." Patricia crossed her arms smugly. Finally, someone with some sense. "This man has been." "I wasn't talking about him," the man cut her off firmly. "I was talking about you." Patricia's mouth hung open mid-sentence. The man continued walking until he reached their row. Michael looked up, and a flash of recognition crossed his face, though he maintained his composure. "Deputy Director Thompson," the man said, extending his hand to Michael. "It's good to see you again, Agent Taylor. Your work on the Harrison case last month was exceptional." A wave of surprised murmurs rippled through the cabin. Patricia's face drained of color. "Thank you, sir," Michael replied quietly, shaking the man's hand. "I didn't realize you were on this flight." The man turned to address the surrounding passengers. "For those who aren't aware, this gentleman is Special Agent Michael Taylor, one of the FBI's top counter-terrorism experts. Last month, he led the operation that prevented a major attack on our nation's capital, saving countless lives." Another passenger a few rows ahead stood up. "Wait, are you the Agent Taylor who testified before Congress last year on the International Security Panel?" Michael nodded slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "Yes, that was me." The reality of the situation began to dawn on everyone. The man Patricia had been treating like a criminal was actually a highly respected federal agent, someone who had dedicated his life to protecting others, including her. Patricia seemed to shrink in her seat. I didn't know," she stammered. "You didn't need to know," the man replied firmly. "You needed to treat a fellow human being with basic respect." Flight attendant Linda stepped forward. "Sir, are you really with the FBI?" The man who had stood up, Regional Director James Wilson, nodded. "We both are. We're heading to the same conference in Los Angeles. Agent Taylor here is one of our keynote speakers." The elderly gentleman in the aisle seat chuckled softly. "Well, isn't that something?" Michael, still maintaining his professional demeanor, turned to Linda. "I'd prefer not to make a bigger scene than this already is. I just want to get to LA and do my job." Director Wilson wasn't finished, however. "I've worked with Agent Taylor for 8 years. He's one of the finest agents I've ever known. He's received commendations from 2 presidents and has saved more American lives than anyone on this plane will ever know." Patricia stared at her lap, her face burning with embarrassment as several passengers began to applaud. Someone in the back called out, "Thank you for your service." The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed completely. Where there had been tension and hostility, there was now a sense of respect and even celebration. Michael, however, looked more uncomfortable than ever. "That's really not necessary," he said quietly. "I'm just doing my job like everyone else." Director Wilson put a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Your humility is commendable, Agent Taylor, but sometimes people need to understand the consequences of their assumptions." He turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, I believe you owe Agent Taylor an apology." All eyes turned to Patricia, who seemed to be struggling to find words. The weight of her actions had finally hit her. She had publicly humiliated a national hero based on nothing but her own prejudice. I'm sorry," she finally managed, barely audible. "I don't think everyone heard you," Director Wilson pressed. Patricia cleared her throat. "I said I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I made assumptions that were incorrect." It was a weak apology at best, clearly motivated more by embarrassment than genuine remorse. Michael, however, simply nodded. "Apology accepted," he said, though the hurt in his eyes told a different story. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I've been informed that the situation has been resolved. We will continue to Los Angeles as scheduled. Flight attendants, please prepare for beverage service." Linda leaned toward Patricia. Ma'am, we have another seat available if you prefer to move. Yes, Patricia said quickly. Yes, I think that would be best. As Patricia gathered her things, avoiding eye contact with everyone around her, another flight attendant appeared to escort her to a new seat near the back of the plane. Several passengers watched her go with disapproving looks. Michael let out a long breath once she was gone. Director Wilson took her now empty seat. You okay? He asked quietly. Been better, Michael admitted. Been worse too. I'm sorry you had to go through that, the elderly man said from his aisle seat. Not everyone is like her, you know. Michael smiled gently. I know. And I appreciate you speaking up earlier. As the flight attendants began their beverage service, trying to restore normalcy to the cabin, passengers kept stealing glances at Michael. Some even approached to shake his hand or thank him. Michael responded politely to each one, though it was clear he would have preferred anonymity. You going to be presenting the Riverside operation findings? Director Wilson asked, deliberately changing the subject to work matters. Michael nodded, grateful for the distraction. Yes, sir. I think the techniques we developed could be valuable for field officers nationwide. As they discussed their upcoming conference, Michael occasionally glanced toward the back of the plane where Patricia had been relocated. He wasn't angry, just sad that even after all these years, all his accomplishments, all his service to his country, some people would still see his skin color before they saw him. What neither Michael nor anyone else on the plane realized was that this incident was far from over. Several passengers had recorded the entire exchange on their phones. By the time they landed in Los Angeles, the videos would already be spreading across social media like wildfire, with consequences none of them could predict. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final descent into Los Angeles. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing. For the remainder of the flight, Michael had kept to himself, occasionally chatting quietly with Director Wilson about the upcoming conference. The elderly gentleman in the aisle seat had introduced himself as Robert, a retired high school principal heading to LA to visit his grandchildren. The three men had found common ground discussing baseball and the unusually warm weather for March. Patricia remained in her reassigned seat at the back of the plane, the target of occasional glares from passengers who had witnessed her behavior. She kept her eyes fixed on her phone, perhaps hoping to become invisible. What none of them realized was that the incident had already escaped the confines of the aircraft. A passenger named Tina, seated 2 rows behind Michael, had captured most of the confrontation on her phone. While using the plane's Wi-Fi, she had uploaded the 8-minute video to her social media accounts with the caption, "Racist woman harasses FBI hero on my flight today. Wait for the twist." By the time the wheels touched down at LAX, Tina's video had been viewed 17,000 times. Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop and the captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign, Linda announced as the plane taxied toward the gate. Michael gathered his belongings, eager to disembark and put the unpleasant experience behind him. He had a car waiting to take him to the hotel where the conference was being held, and he was looking forward to a hot shower and room service. Agent Taylor, Director Wilson said as they prepared to leave, "I meant what I said earlier. Your work on the Harrison case was exceptional. The Bureau is lucky to have you." Michael nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, sir. Coming from you, that means a lot." As the passengers filed off the plane, several stopped to shake Michael's hand or pat him on the shoulder. A young boy, no more than 10 years old, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you really an FBI agent? Do you have a gun?" "Tommy," his mother scolded, pulling him along. "I'm so sorry about that." Michael smiled. "It's no problem. And yes, I am an FBI agent, but no, I don't carry my gun when I'm off duty." He winked at the boy, whose face lit up with excitement. When Michael finally stepped into the terminal, he was surprised to see 2 uniformed airport police officers waiting. For a split second, he wondered if he was being met for security reasons. "Agent Taylor," one of the officers asked. "Yes, that's me." "Sir, we've been made aware of the incident on your flight. The airline has asked us to escort you to the premium lounge while they handle the situation." Michael was confused. "What situation?" "The flight is over." The second officer glanced at his phone. "Sir, the video is going viral." The airline wants to address the matter properly, and there are also several reporters who've caught wind of the story. Michael's heart sank. This was exactly what he hadn't wanted: more attention, more spectacle, more being singled out. "That's really not necessary," he began, but Director Wilson cut in. "Accept the courtesy, Agent Taylor. You've earned it." Meanwhile, as Patricia exited the plane, she was met by the airline's customer service manager. "Ms. Wilson, I'm Greg from Customer Relations. I need you to come with me, please." Patricia looked nervous. "Why? What's going on?" "We need to discuss the incident that occurred during your flight today." "That was a private matter," Patricia protested, her voice rising with anxiety. Greg's expression remained neutral but firm. "I'm afraid it's no longer private, ma'am. There are videos circulating online, and the airline needs to address this officially." Patricia's face drained of color for the second time that day. "Videos? What videos?" In a small conference room away from the main terminal, Greg informed Patricia that she was being banned from the airline for 6 months due to her disruptive behavior. Additionally, the airline would be issuing a public statement condemning her actions and reaffirming their zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. "This is ridiculous," Patricia exclaimed. "You can't do this to me. Do you know who I am?" Greg consulted his tablet. "Yes, ma'am. You're Patricia Wilson, Senior Vice President of Marketing at TechFront Industries. At least, that's what your LinkedIn profile says, which is currently being shared alongside the videos." Patricia froze. The implication hit her like a physical blow. "My company? They'll see this?" "Ma'am, by our last check, the main video has over 50,000 views and is growing rapidly. Several news outlets have already picked it up. I would imagine your company is aware or soon will be." Across town, in the premium airline lounge, Michael sat in a quiet corner with a complimentary cup of coffee, trying to process the day's events. An airline representative had profusely apologized and offered him a lifetime of premium status, which he had politely declined. "Agent Taylor," the representative had insisted, "we want you to know that the behavior you experienced today does not reflect our values as a company. We're taking this very seriously." Michael had nodded, too tired to argue. "I appreciate that. I really do. But what I'd appreciate even more is just being treated like any other passenger." His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "You're all over the internet, babe. You okay?" Before he could reply, it buzzed again. This time it was from his supervisor back in DC. "Just saw the video. Call me when you land." Michael sighed deeply. All he had wanted was a quiet flight and a chance to prepare for his presentation. Now he had become the unwitting center of a viral moment, his private humiliation transformed into public spectacle. As he collected his thoughts, contemplating how to navigate this unexpected turn of events, he couldn't help but wonder what consequences Patricia would face. Little did he know that across town, her professional life was already beginning to unravel, setting the stage for a reckoning neither of them could have anticipated. Michael woke up in his hotel room to the sound of his phone buzzing nonstop. It was 6:30 a.m., and he planned to review his presentation notes before breakfast. Instead, he found himself staring at a screen filled with notifications. Missed calls from his mother, his brother, college friends he hadn't spoken to in years. Text messages, email alerts, social media mentions by the hundreds. "This can't be good," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. He opened the most recent text from his wife. "Honey, you're trending #1 on 3 platforms. CNN just ran the story. Call me." With a growing sense of dread, Michael opened one of the news links she'd sent. There it was, his face, captured in high definition during one of the most humiliating moments of his life, now splashed across millions of screens nationwide. The headline read, "FBI hero faces racism on flight, airlines respond." "Great," he sighed, falling back against his pillows. His phone rang. It was Director Wilson. "Morning, sir," Michael answered, trying to sound more awake than he felt. "Taylor, have you seen the news?" "Just looking at it now, sir. The Bureau's PR team is going crazy. They want to issue a statement of support, but I told them I'd check with you first." Michael closed his eyes. "Honestly, sir, I'd prefer if they didn't. This will blow over in a few days. People will find something else to be outraged about." There was a pause on the other end. It's not that simple, Taylor. The video has over 8 million views now. Major news networks are running it. Politicians are tweeting about it. And Director Wilson hesitated. The woman has been identified. Michael sat up straight. What do you mean, identified? Internet sleuths. They found her LinkedIn, her company, everything. Tech Front Industries is trending too, but not in a good way. Across town, Patricia sat alone in her hotel room, blinds drawn, room service trays piling up. She hadn't left the room since checking in yesterday afternoon. Her phone lay on the bedside table, powered off after hours of non-stop notifications, many containing words she'd never had directed at her before. The television droned in the background, volume low. She'd been flipping channels all night, only to find her own face appearing on screen after screen. Plain Karen, they were calling her. The video had been viewed millions of times, picked apart, analyzed, commented on. A knock at the door made her jump. "Housekeeping," called a voice. "No thank you," Patricia replied, her voice cracking from disuse. Her laptop chimed with an incoming email. She'd been avoiding her work account, but curiosity got the better of her. It was from Howard Barnes, CEO of Tech Front Industries. The subject line, urgent meeting, 10 a.m. today. The body of the email was brief. "Patricia, in light of the recent incident that has come to our attention, we require your immediate presence for a video conference with the executive team and HR at 10 a.m. sharp. This matter cannot wait." Patricia's hands shook as she closed the laptop. In her 15 years at TechFront, she'd risen from marketing manager to senior VP through relentless drive and ruthless efficiency. She'd survived 3 rounds of layoffs, 2 mergers, and countless corporate restructurings. But she'd never faced anything like this. Meanwhile, Michael's day wasn't going much better. He'd made it to the conference center, only to find himself the center of attention in a room full of fellow FBI agents, people who were supposed to be focusing on counter-terrorism strategies, not office gossip. "There he is," someone whispered as he entered the main hall. Colleagues he barely knew came up to express their support. Others simply stared or pointed discreetly. Michael nodded politely, maintaining his professional demeanor, but inside he was exhausted. The incident itself had been draining enough without becoming an unwilling celebrity. During the morning break, his phone rang again. This time, it was the FBI's Public Affairs Office. "Agent Taylor, we've had requests for interviews from Good Morning America, Today Show, every major network. The director himself would like you to consider speaking publicly about your experience." Michael pinched the bridge of his nose. "With all due respect, that's not going to happen. I'm here to do my job, not become the poster child for whatever this is. Sir, this could be an important teaching moment for the country. Your handling of the situation was exemplary, and—" "I appreciate the sentiment," Michael cut in, "but my answer is no. Please respect that." Back at Tech Front Industries headquarters, the emergency board meeting was not going well for Patricia. On a large screen, her face stared back at her from a paused frame of the viral video. "This goes against everything our company stands for," Howard Barnes said, his voice even but severe. "Our diversity and inclusion policy is clear. Our corporate values statement, which you helped write, Patricia, explicitly condemns discrimination of any kind." Patricia stared at her hands. "I understand, and I'm deeply sorry. I was tired, stressed about the Anderson presentation, and I overreacted." "Overreacted?" The HR director interjected. "You publicly humiliated a federal agent based on racial profiling. That's not an overreaction, it's misconduct." "Our stock dropped 3 points this morning," added the CFO. "We've lost 2 potential clients who've cited this incident specifically. The hashtag boycott Tech Front is trending." Howard's expression was grim. "Patricia, we've worked together for many years, and your contributions to this company have been significant. But this incident has caused immeasurable harm to our reputation. Effective immediately, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation." The words hit Patricia like physical blows. Suspended. Investigation. Her career, her identity, her status, all crumbling because of 8 minutes on an airplane. As the day wore on, the story continued to evolve. News outlets dug deeper into both Michael's distinguished career and Patricia's professional history. Social media was ablaze with debates about racism, privilege, and accountability. Commentators dissected every second of the video, every expression, every word spoken. By evening, both Michael and Patricia found themselves at the center of a national conversation neither had asked to join, unwilling symbols in America's ongoing struggle with its own contradictions and prejudices. What neither of them could have predicted was how their paths would cross again in circumstances neither could have imagined. 3 months had passed since the airplane incident. Summer had settled over Washington, D.C., bringing with it the city's characteristic humidity and afternoon thunderstorms. Michael sat at his desk in the FBI headquarters, reviewing case files and occasionally glancing at the framed photo of his family that kept him grounded through difficult days. A knock on his office door interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called. His assistant poked her head in. "Sir, Director Wilson would like to see you when you have a moment." Michael nodded. "Tell him I'll be right there." As he walked through the hallway, he couldn't help noticing how things had changed. The stares had finally stopped. The whispers had died down. His unwanted fame had gradually faded as the news cycle moved on to fresher controversies. He had declined every interview request, turned down book deals, and politely refused when a streaming service wanted to option his story for a documentary. All he had wanted was to return to normal life, to be defined by his work and character rather than by 8 viral minutes on an airplane. Director Wilson greeted him with a firm handshake. "Take a seat, Taylor. How's the Richardson case coming along?" "Making progress, sir. We've identified the funding sources and tracked communication patterns." "I think we're close." Good. Wilson leaned back in his chair. "That's not why I called you in, though. I received an unusual request this morning." He slid a folder across the desk. "Someone wants to meet with you." Michael opened the folder and froze. Staring back at him was a familiar face, Patricia Wilson. "What does she want?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Apparently, she's been trying to reach you for weeks. She's gone through proper channels this time, contacted our public affairs office, submitted formal requests." Wilson studied Michael's reaction. "She says she wants to apologize in person." Michael closed the folder. "I appreciate you letting me know, sir, but I don't see the point. It's over. I've moved on." Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "Normally, I'd agree with you. But there's something else." He handed Michael another document. "She's been working with the Center for Racial Justice, leading workshops, speaking at schools. Apparently, the incident changed her, or so she claims." Michael scanned the document, a summary of Patricia's activities over the past 3 months. Community service hours, diversity training certifications, testimonials from people who'd worked with her. "Could be a PR stunt," Michael said skeptically. "Could be," Wilson agreed. "Or it could be genuine. Either way, I told her I'd ask you. The decision is entirely yours." Michael took the folder with him, intending to throw it away. Instead, it sat on his desk for days, occasionally catching his eye as he worked. Finally, curiosity got the better of him. A week later, Michael found himself sitting in a conference room at the Center for Racial Justice waiting. The neutral location had been his one condition for the meeting. He checked his watch, wondering if she would actually show up. The door opened and Patricia walked in. She looked different, less polished, more human somehow. The designer clothes and perfect hair had been replaced by a simple blouse and natural styling. But the biggest difference was in her eyes. They carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Agent Taylor," she said softly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Michael nodded but said nothing. Patricia took a seat across from him, her hands fidgeting with a tissue. "I've rehearsed this moment 100 times, and now I can't remember anything I planned to say." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. Those words feel completely inadequate, but I need to say them anyway. I'm deeply, truly sorry for how I treated you." Michael studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity but finding none. "What exactly are you sorry for, Ms. Wilson?" The directness of his question seemed to catch her off guard. For everything. For making assumptions about you. For humiliating you in public. For not seeing you as a person. And if I hadn't turned out to be an FBI agent, if I had just been an ordinary black man trying to get to Los Angeles, would you still be sorry?" Patricia didn't flinch from the question. "That's what I've been asking myself every day for the past 3 months. And the answer is, I wouldn't be sitting here right now, not because I wouldn't have done something terrible, but because I wouldn't have recognized it as terrible. She wiped away a tear. The truth is, I wouldn't have faced any consequences. The video wouldn't have gone viral. I wouldn't have lost my job or become a social pariah. Michael's expression remained neutral. You lost your job? Patricia nodded. TechFront fired me after a 2-week investigation. I deserved it. But losing my job was just the beginning. I lost friends. Family members stopped speaking to me. I received death threats. My entire identity collapsed. She looked down at her hands. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it feels like to be judged and rejected based on a single incident rather than who I am as a person. That must have been difficult, Michael said, his tone softening slightly. It was the wake-up call I needed, Patricia admitted. I spent weeks in therapy, just trying to understand why I did what I did. The prejudices I didn't even know I carried. The assumptions I made without thinking. Michael leaned forward. And what did you learn? That I've been living in a bubble of privilege my entire life. That I've benefited from systems that I didn't even see. That what happened on that plane wasn't an isolated incident, it was the culmination of a lifetime of unchallenged biases. She looked directly at Michael. And I learned that apologizing isn't enough. That's why I'm here. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder of her own. I started working with schools and community organizations, sharing my story as a cautionary tale. Not to rehabilitate my image, but because people who look like me need to hear it from someone who looks like me. She slid the folder toward him. I've also created a scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in law enforcement. It's not much yet, but it's growing. Michael glanced at the materials, genuinely surprised by the extent of her efforts. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want you to know that what happened changed me. But more importantly, because I'm hoping you might consider something. She hesitated. The center has asked me to develop a training program for corporations on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. Having you involved would make it much more powerful. Michael shook his head. I'm not interested in becoming the poster child for. I understand, Patricia interrupted, and I respect that. But this isn't about exploiting what happened. It's about using our shared experience to create meaningful change. No cameras, no publicity. Just honest conversations with people who need to hear them. For the first time since the incident, Michael felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that something constructive might emerge from such a painful experience. I'll think about it, he said finally. As they prepared to leave, Patricia paused at the door. There's one more thing you should know. During these past months, I've met many people who've faced discrimination far worse than what I put you through. People without your platform, your authority, your resources. Their stories don't go viral. Their abusers face no consequences. Michael nodded sullenly. I know. That's why I'm doing this work now, she continued. Not to make myself feel better, but because I finally understand that silence makes me complicit. And I can't go back to that life of comfortable blameness. 2 weeks later, Michael stood before a room of corporate executives, sharing his experiences of navigating a world that often judged him based on appearance rather than character. Beside him stood Patricia, using her own journey from ignorance to awareness to challenge others like her. They weren't friends, the wound had been too deep for that, but they had found a purpose in their unexpected connection. Together, they were starting conversations that needed to happen, creating ripples that would hopefully extend far beyond that fateful flight. As Michael watched the faces in the audience, some uncomfortable, some defensive, some genuinely moved, he reflected on how a moment of humiliation had transformed into something meaningful. Not because he had sought vengeance or fame, but because he had chosen to transform pain into purpose. And in that transformation, both he and Patricia had found something neither had expected, not redemption or forgiveness, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their story might help prevent someone else's.